Okay, you guys are now live and can start on the hour.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Golden Artist Colors. I'm Kevin Greeland, and today we're going to take a dive into our 5 lines of paint. So I'm going to switch the camera to our overhead, and we're going to start reviewing the 5 lines of paint. I'll go over some facts first, and then we'll take a little time and we'll start pulling out some paint and moving some paint around. And I have some dry examples for you as well. So to start off, we're going to start talking about our first line of paint, and that is our heavy body paints. Available in traditional tubes, and we also have them in jar format. So the heavy body paints were the first that were offered by Golden. They are smooth and buttery in consistency. The palette includes the largest assortment of unique pure pigments available to artists. They offer excellent permanency and light fastness, and there are no fillers, extenders, pacifiers, toners, or dyes added to our heavy body paints. The next one up is Open. Open are our slow drying paints, much like our heavy body, but they're slightly softer in consistency. The increased working time of these colors expands their range to include more traditional techniques that were once only available by oils. The thickness, we recommend that you keep it around 1 millimeter for drying. Drying time can be accelerated by mixing it with heavy body or even our fluids. Because Open dries slowly, you can cover your palette and keep these working for days, if not weeks. Our next color up is, our next line of paint rather, is our fluids. The fluids equal the heavy body in their intensity. The binder is the thing that makes them slightly different, but same pigment load. They give you less brush strokes and they're kind of the consistency of heavy cream. The next one up is our high flow, and high flow are much like an ink in consistency. The high flow has a retarder in it so that you can use it for airbrush and a number of different applications, including dip pens and refillable markers. And we'll take a deeper look at those a little bit later. And the last line, our newest line of paint, is So Flat. So Flat is a matte acrylic. It's not glossy, as you can see, compared to the other ones here. If I hold this a little bit in the light, you can see the sheen reflected off of those. And the So Flat really is the flattest of all of them. And notice the least amount of brush strokes there. You can see the brush strokes in the heavy body, the open, a little bit of mark in the fluid and high flow, but none in that So Flat. So those are our 5 lines: heavy body, open, fluid, high flow, and So Flat. So we're going to explore these in a little more detail for each line of paint. A good thing to have handy is a color chart, because not all the colors are available in all formats. And that has to do with the cooperation of the pigment with the binder. The one thing to keep in mind is if you really like a lot of texture or brush stroke, you'll see that in the heavy body the best, and then the open second. With the open, we put this out yesterday, and you can see right here, you can see this area is very dry, but I made it a little extra thick right there. And I'm going to try and reactivate that with a little bit of open thinner. And you'll see why working with the open is so nice. So there we go. So this was sitting since yesterday. Now here it was a little rainy and humid. So the open really depends on a couple of, everybody asks how long does it take to dry? It depends on a couple of things. One is what you're painting on. So whether that substrate is super absorbent, the amount of humidity in your studio, airflow, all of those things. So open just takes a while to dry. The other thing to keep in mind is all of these have a different sheen. And that sheen is pretty much for the heavy body, it's determined by the pigment. With the So Flat, we intentionally put matting agent to keep them all uniform. When working with these, if sheen is a kind of a consideration, one of the things you can do, we've taken the same line of paint. So we have our heavy body, our open, our fluid, our high flow, and the So Flat. In this case, we've mixed gloss medium with all of those. And so we were able to change the sheen of those with that gloss medium. And so you can see, even see with the So Flat, we were able to add a little bit of shine to that. The same can be done if you don't like the gloss. The same can be done with matte medium. So here again, the same lines of paint, our heavy body, our open, our fluid, our high flow, and So Flat. And this time, instead of gloss, we've used matte medium and mixed those. So all of these work really well with any of our mediums, pastes, or gels. Here, same colors again, heavy body, open, fluid, high flow, and So Flat. This happens to be our ultramarine blue. We've mixed with the gloss glazing liquid, these, and the satin glazing liquid with these. So if you want to change the sheen, you can do that with any number of mediums. The other one I wanted to point out was why you might want to use one or the other. So this is a dry example, and this is crackle paste. So I have this board here, which is just the crackle paste by itself. It's a product that we make. It's designed to crack. You don't have a lot of control over the cracks. You can see there's very fine ones, and then there's a lot larger ones with a thicker application. So one of the things you could keep in mind when you're choosing your paint, you can see here, we've used our heavy body, and I used a very damp brush. So heavy body application, then the open application, the fluid application, and then the high flow and the So Flat. So sometimes, depending on what you want to paint on, you might want to consider one of these paints because the heavy body, you can see, really covers up the cracks there. So it cancels out the effect of the crackle paste, especially the small ones. So that's maybe where you might make the choice for high flow, because you can see I was able to color that, but also retain all the cracks. And you can see with the So Flat, of course, it canceled out all those cracks. So again, another consideration besides sheen might be texture and what you're painting on. All right. Then the last thing is mixability. So all of these can be mixed together. We have, again, the heavy body, then the open, fluid, high flow, and So Flat. And these, again, are our ultramarine blue. You can see brush strokes with the heavy body, a few brush strokes with the open. Remember that the open is a little softer than the heavy body, and then the fluid, the high flow, and because that So Flat has that leveling agent in there, very few brush strokes. But we've used, I believe this was benzimidazole yellow medium in a fluid, and I've mixed those with each of the lines of paint. So you can see the color consistency across there. It does alter the texture a little bit when you're mixing these, especially when you get to the open. I'll talk a little bit about that more in depth. But you can see even mixing a heavy body and fluid, we were able to retain a lot of the brush stroke. Open and a fluid, we retained the brush stroke. And then the fluid mixed with fluid, you can see there's some brush stroke there. If I tilt that, you can see the light catches those brush marks on the fluid. And then with the high flow, this is the one down here, the high flow, a little bit of brush stroke because we're mixing it with that fluid. So you can see a little bit. And then of course with the So Flat, this is the So Flat by itself, and I'm mixing it with the fluid. You can see some brush stroke, but really those individual strokes of the brush compared to like the fluid or the high flow, you can see pretty much almost eliminated there. So that's with mixing with fluid. So if you're the type of artist that really likes a lot of brush strokes and you want to see a lot of texture, one of the things that you may want to consider is using the heavy body. So this is our heavy body. This happens to be dioxazine purple. And I'll go ahead and brush some out there. So you can see this really holds the brush stroke. It's thick, it's creamy, it's designed to hold that brush stroke. Lots of rich, pure pigment. If I introduce just a little bit of water, this looks black, but just a little bit of water, you can see that beautiful purple violet color there. So if texture and brush stroke is your thing, definitely the heavy body paints would be for you. The next one up, I'm going to compare our fluids and our heavy body. So this is our fluid teal, and this is our heavy body teal. And remember, we were saying that it's the binder that makes them different. It's not, a lot of people are under the misconception that we take our heavy body paint and we add a lot of water to it to create the fluid or the high flow, and that's not true. It's just the binder that's slightly different. So this is our heavy body and our fluid. So you can see if I hold this up, you can see the fluid, a lot more viscous, a nice flow to it compared to the heavy body. In terms of doing the brush strokes, you can see that heavy body is going to hold all the brush strokes. If I switch brushes, the fluid a little bit less so. There's still some there depending on how thick I have it. But again, heavy body, if you like lots of juicy texture, lots of brush strokes showing, a little less with the fluid. The nice thing about the fluids, this is our manganese blue hue. The nice thing about the fluids is that flowing consistency. So you can take advantage of that. I'm going to hold this up and let that run a little bit. So you can see that flowing consistency. You can take advantage of that. And here we just allowed the fluids to behave like themselves and left them run to create our painting. So that is our fluid acrylics. The next one up that I want to talk about is our open. And this is the one, a few misconceptions about this one. So we're going to put this out. And as I said earlier, a lot of these can be mixed together. So let's put out, this is benzimidazolone yellow light. This is our heavy body. This is the one that's going to retain the brush strokes. And then our ultramarine blue in open. And you can tell these apart pretty easily because the tubes of the open have these black caps and then this black barrel. We think of it as maybe a top hat and tuxedo. And then the heavy body is just simply the white tube. So as I said, you can mix these. The open has that slower drying time. So I'll try and we'll approximate a 50-50 blend here. Put this is the yellow heavy body with the blue ultramarine open. And I'll mix these two together. And you can see that the open is a little bit softer than the heavy body. And nothing is really going to happen with this, except I'm just going to create a secondary color, and I will affect the drying time of the open. So let me get a clean knife here. You can see with the heavy body, if I kind of pull up on that, you can see how high those peaks go. If I do the same thing with the open, you can see a little less so, and that's because the open is just a little bit softer than the heavy body, but completely compatible. As I said, you can mix the open with our fluids or with our heavy body. If for some reason you really wanted to, you could even mix it with the So-Flat. So the thing about the open is this is going to stay wet for quite some time. As I showed you in my blue one, when we reactivated this paint film, I reactivated that paint film with a little bit of open thinner. So this will stay wet. Like I said, we did this a day ago, and that was still wet as of today. Reactivated a little bit with the open thinner. So this open will stay quite wet for quite a while. Again, everybody asks how long, and that really depends on what you're painting on, how thick the application is, the environment you're painting in, more humidity, less humidity, and what you're painting on, whether it's paper or a wood panel. So here, my 50-50 combination, I have this beautiful green. If I let this dry, what you'll see happen, here is my heavy body yellow. And when we put this down, you can see the first 15 minutes, that heavy body was wet. So I was able to drag my finger through there and create a texture in that paint. And in the middle, I have my even mix of my open and my yellow. And then over here on this side, I have the open. 15 minutes, that open is still wet. 30 minutes, the open is still wet. Let me move this up a little bit. 60 minutes, the open is still wet. And 90 minutes, the open is still wet. The 50-50 mixture, that 15 minutes, definitely still wet. 30 minutes, it was still wet. At the 60 minutes, I was able to mar that surface a little bit. And then, of course, at the 90 minutes, that combination was dry. So depending on your circumstances in the environment that you're painting, with this film thickness, you have potentially up to an hour to manipulate that open paint. So the open paint is ideal for lots of things because it stays wet. Plein air painting, of course, is a great one. But additionally, you can use this for printmaking techniques. So here we use the open for printmaking technique. We also use the open for silk screening. And you can do subtractive work. We just put out a film of paint, a little messy at that, but I just used color shapers or Q-tips to wipe the paint away so I could do subtractive work with that or reductive work. So open, excellent choice if you like the consistency of heavy body. This is a little softer, but gives you a much greater extended working time. And the nice thing with the open is because it stays wet, you can save unique color mixes, put them in a palette, seal the palette, and you'll have plenty of time over the course of days or weeks to work with open. One of the other things I wanted to point out is that all of these paints kind of work together and can work together. Here we used a fluid color to paint our canvas, and then we blocked in our color using a fluid as well. And then using heavy body and open together. So doing mixtures of these, I was able to create a lot more definition and finish the painting off similar to a traditional painting. Depending on the quantity that you use, again, how much of the open or the heavy body you use will affect the drying time. So you just have to do a couple little experiments in your studio. If you're, let's say, in New Orleans where it's very humid, this is going to take a little bit longer to dry. If you're in a place like, let's say, New Mexico, where it's very dry, this might speed up a little bit. Okay. So the next one up I want to talk about is our high flow. And I'll say that this is a lot of information to cover. And so if you forget some of this, definitely feel free to visit the website, goldenpaints.com. You can also go to justpaint.org. There are several great articles that kind of go over the consistency of these and talk about some of the unique things for each of the paint lines. So the next one up is our high flow acrylics. These originally were kind of like our airbrush colors, and eventually they morphed into our high flow several years back. So I'm just do a little consistency test here for you. And I'm going to put some fluid on here. And this is our Quin Magenta in the fluid. And then we're going to do the same with the high flow. And I'm going to hold this up so you can see, you know, that consistency. So it's very much like an ink. Here's the fluid still slowly seeping down to the bottom, but you can see the high flow right down there. So high flow, very viscous, great for refillable pens and markers. So you can use this one for calligraphy in refillable markers. You can use it like a watercolor for watercolor effects. Just remember that this isn't a watercolor, it's acrylic, so it will dry and it won't be liftable. You can use it for coloring fabric, and it's great on wood surfaces. So here it's on wood. In addition to these, you can also do some airbrush. So great for airbrush. It does have an extender in there, which delays the drying a little bit. And again, depending on your painting technique, you can also use this on canvas, and you can mix this with our fluids or with our heavy body if you wanted to. The nice thing about this high flow is that you can use it in refillable markers or pens. You could do your preliminary drawing if you wanted on your canvas or your wood panel first. This is a fine line applicator. And this is filled with our fluorescent orange. So you can see I can get a really fine line with no pressure at all. If I just let it flow out, if I squeeze it a little bit, you can see I can get a thicker line. So these are really nice. For some reason, if you want to sign your work or you want to do some drawing, there are these empty markers. They come with a little bead inside so that you can agitate. Any of these empty markers, you can find these almost anywhere. You can fill those with the high flow. So this is one of the smaller points. And again, this is the ultra blue in there for a while. So these were in about a week. And so you can see they've not dried. This is the Quin Magenta here. And of course, you know, I can go over while they're wet. You'll see they'll bleed or blend a little bit. So high flow, excellent for airbrush, refillable markers or pens. paintbrush itself or water media effects, or even calligraphy pens. I have a dry sample here. So you can do, just using a variety of different markers in different sizes, you can get all kinds of effects. This is kind of a fun one using the high flow on plexiglass or acrylic sheeting. Just watered it down a little bit like a watercolor, and you can see it doesn't matter really which side you're viewing. I put some acrylic ground for pastel on here, did a little drawing, and then just the high flow on top of that. All of our products can be used in different applications on fabric as well. There's several good articles to read about that. Here is the high flow on a painted fabric. We just brushed it on directly. This is using the open. So again, the open, the one in the black, and a silk screen onto the fabric. This one again is also using the open on a stencil. And then last on the sheer, if you can see this, this is using our fluid bronze on this. And we'll talk a little bit later about how we got that green from the bronze. So in addition to traditional painting techniques, you have lots of options for mixed media approaches as well with these paint lines. And we do have someone in the chat answering your questions. I'm sure she is taking care of you very well. The next one up is our So-Flat, and that's our newest. They come in jars, not tubes, and it says, you know, it has this So-Flat logo on the top. There is a color chart for the So-Flat, so you can get a hold of one of those. Here we've just gone ahead and painted out some of the colors. This is from a So-Flat set that's called Zing. So these are the colors that are in the Zing set. And then just to show you some of the options, we use the black here to mix up those colors. And then we use the white, the titanium white here to mix up these colors. These are very flat. If I tilt this to the side, you can see there's not a lot of reflection. And you don't see a lot of brush stroke, and we did brush these on. Use a soft thin synthetic brush. This is a good example here where we've put on the So-Flat here, and then on the bottom, this is our fluid Quin Magenta. So that's this one here, Quin Magenta. And you see the Quin Magenta, because it's one of those modern colors, it's a little on the transparent side, and you can see that in the light. It's a little shiny. Let me move this other board out of the way so you can see this one clearly. Too many boards on the table. All right, so as I was saying, with the So-Flat, it's very flat, really kind of absorbs that light compared to the fluid. And the thing to note again, this can be mixed with any of our colors. It could be mixed with a heavy body, it could be mixed with open or high flow. Just know that whatever you do to that mixing, it's going to decrease the matte effect here that you get from the So-Flat. And if I tilt this one this way, you can kind of see the light here. When I've added just a small drop, I changed the color from here to there by adding just 1 or 2 drops. You can see the more paint that I add, that sheen starts to build with these two, and then down to this one here. A beautiful color is just that it's no longer as flat as this because I used that fluid to mix with the So-Flat. So definitely mixable. There are fluorescents with the So-Flat as well. The fluorescents aren't quite as opaque. You can see there's a black line painted under each of these, and we painted the So-Flat over top. So that black line does show a little bit. Here we added the So-Flat white to make them a little more opaque. And then we added the So-Flat black. You can still see a good amount of color. The black kind of dulls that fluorescent effect. And then just for fun, we went ahead and added another paint called micaceous iron oxide into that. So we got a real nice texture, and I'll talk about this texture a little bit later when we look at our specialty paints. This is kind of fun just to show you that you can use, just like you do with heavy body or fluids, you can use stencils with this. This is a stencil of So Flat. This is cerulean blue is the background color. And then we mixed a cerulean blue with a little bit of white just to create some contrast there over top of a stencil. So this is flat on flat or matte on matte. This one's kind of fun because you can use the matteness to create a little bit of texture. So if I hold this up, you can see that light move across there. And so in this case, we just used the same color, or cerulean blue, but we mixed it with a gloss gel. And that gloss gel, really changed the sheen again on that. So again, all of the paints, despite the sheen that they come with, you can change that sheen depending on what medium or material you mix with that. This is another one. We just mixed this with So Flat. We mixed with light molding place. So we were able to create some dimension. If I hold this on the side, you can hopefully see that dimension. But notice it's matte. The light molding paste is a little matte to start with, and then we use both two matte colors to paint the background in this one. So that is our 5 lines of paint: heavy body, our fluid, our open, our high flow, and the newest one, the So Flat. Within those lines of paints, we have what we refer to as our specialty paints. So I'm going to switch these out and we're going to take a look at those. So the specialty paints, depending on which ones, some are available in heavy body, some are available in fluid or high flow, but not all. And again, that has to do with how well that pigment behaves in the binder. So the first we're going to look at is in the line of iridescence. So we have a specialty line that we refer to as iridescence, and this is stainless steel. We have 2 that have real particles. So this is real particles of stainless steel. And this is the heavy body. It is available in a fluid as well. I'll lay that there so you can see that tube. A little bit softer than the heavy body, but beautiful texture when it's dry. A great color, and you can mix this. If I'll drop in, this is Quin Magenta. So we'll drop in a drop or 2 of Quin Magenta high flow and mix that up. So you can mix these again, just because they're kind of separate by themselves, specialty paint, and they happen to be the iridescence. You can mix these with any of our colors and create beautiful variations on the color. So stainless steel, and it is real particles of stainless steel. So that is one of our iridescent colors. Let me move those out of the way, and we'll take another look at one of my favorites, which is the micaceous iron oxide. All right, micaceous iron oxide. Again, this is one of those that is real particle. It's a hematite ore. And this is available in a fluid and heavy body. And you can see it's kind of a rich, kind of charcoal black. There are little reflective particles in there, and they become a little more pronounced when they dry. So I do have a dry version here. So you can see that little bit of sparkle in there. If I just hold it on the side for a little bit, you can see that little kind of a green flecky sparkle, which I think is great. We'll do the same thing. I'll mix a little bit of the Quin Magenta. This is the high flow, but you could also use a fluid or even heavy body. I find that the fluids probably are the easiest to incorporate. Just put a little drop there. So again, if you wanted this texture, but you wanted to change the color, you could do that as well. Again, you can mix these with all the paint lines, and you get, that's a luscious color there. Love that. All right. The other thing about the micaceous iron oxide is a little bit like maybe an emery board or sandpaper. It has a little bit of tooth or texture to it, which makes it great for, you could use colored pencil on there. You can hear that texture. Oil pastels, and or chalk pastels. So in addition to being a paint, this one also becomes a good ground for a number of different materials. You could do a painting on top of this with high flow or a fluid, so it's more of a water media effect, or you can mix it with the paint itself. But micaceous iron oxide, one of my favorites, and that's from the iridescent line. Let me clean this up. And then we'll switch these out, and I'll switch to, I have a full line of iridescence to look at here. Switch those out and we'll take a look at these. So the other one that's kind of interesting, now the rest of these they're a colorant with a mica flake. So the micaceous iron oxide and the stainless steel are the two exceptions. This happens to be our bronze. I'll put a little bit of the heavy body out. So iridescent bronze. Also, we'll do a little fluid just so you can kind of see them side by side. So again, same pigment load, it just depends on how much texture you want. The fluid, easy to spread around. Heavy body, easy to spread around. A little more texture is showing, brushstroke or palette knife. Again, both of these, because they're basically the same, you can see you can mix those together. The nice thing about the bronze is the other iridescents are all kind of single agent. It's the mica with a colorant. The bronze, we have a little bit of color in there. And I'm going to go ahead and splash a little bit of water on here, not too much, hopefully. And we'll let that sit. I've done this earlier. So while that one's sitting, I put this one in a little plastic boat, a paper towel, and I filled it with water and then squirted the fluid out on top. And so the nice thing about this, you can see right along the edge here, might be hard to see. There we go. You see that phthalo green is kind of starting to seep out. So what I love about the bronze is it kind of creates this natural patina right away if you use some water. And you can see that developing along that leading edge. So for this reason, you can see some right there as well, where I splashed the water down at the bottom. See that green starting to leach out? So the longer you leave this set, the more that phthalo will pull out. Now this is on a paper towel, so rather dramatic compared to the paper. But this is the iridescent bronze, available in a heavy body and a fluid. Let's switch that one out. And you can see that green floating there just as I move that. Try not to make a mess on the table. So here we have the iridescence. We'll take a look at these first. There's a pearl, a gold, bright gold, gold deep, and copper. And these are all put on with fluid. These are the fluid format. And then we have copper light, bronze, and then the silver, the stainless steel, and then that micaceous iron oxide that I like. Remember, these two are the ones that have the real particles, stainless steel and the hematite ore. The others are all mica particles with a colorant. These are great to mix as well. So just to show you some different options. Here's the pearl, the gold, copper light, bronze, the silver, and the micaceous iron oxide. And then mixing them with our fluids at the top, I have green gold, manganese blue, and then our quin magenta. And so just look at the range of colors I'm able to get with the pearl, mixing it with the green gold, the manganese blue, and the quin magenta. So might be a good idea just to experiment with some of these and mix them with other colors just to see the range of possibilities that you can get. And they do have a little bit of that shimmer to them that you can see in the light. So beautiful color range that you can create with those iridescent colors. And then if the iridescents weren't enough, we can jump into some real bling. And this is our coarse alumina, black mica, pearl mica, our gold mica, small and large. And so you can see those particles in there, and you can see that bright light, kind of lots of bling. But these are great for creating textures. Even if they get covered up, they create beautiful texture. And these are composed of mica and colorants. And just to show you the possibilities, we've taken those same colors and we mixed in a little bit of that quin magenta. And you can see here is the coarse alumina with the quin magenta, the black mica, and then the pearl, the gold. So you're able to change the color, great texture with those. So if bling is the thing you're after, these are good. The coarse alumina also makes a great drawing surface. It's very coarse. It'll wear down the colored pencil or charcoal pretty fast, but it makes a great background as well. The other set of colors, so now we're leaving our iridescence and we're going to head to our interference colors. We'll switch those out. So the interference colors are a little unique. It's really not that big of a mystery. It just has to do with the density of some titanium white on mica flakes. So this is the interference violet that we're looking at. And I'm just going to squirt some on there. So in the light, just looking at that, you can see it kind of has a little, it's hard to see, but it has almost a little green cast to it, right? Depending on the way that light hits it. But when you squirt that out, you're like, I don't see the violet. And that's the beauty of the interference colors. I'm going to go ahead and mix a little bit of this green in here, and you'll understand how this works. Because this is really mica particles with titanium white. It's the density of that titanium white over those mica particles that create the color. So let me go ahead. And for color theorists, you know, if you were mixing green and violet, you'd wind up with kind of a ick color. But here, mixing the interference color with the green, you kind of just wind up with a lighter version of that green. So the real beauty of this can be seen in the interference colors. This is the way they kind of all work. The real beauty of this is the way that they appear on a black surface. So you, as that dries, you'll start to get, see that gold in there? I mean, excuse me, the violet in there popping through the green gold. So the interference colors work great on a dark background, but you can also add a little bit of black to them to enhance that. So this is using our fluid interference violet, and we mix that with a little bit of green gold. All it really did was just change that green gold to a lighter green gold. But when I apply that to the black surface and I kind of pull that down, you can see that violet color as it starts to dry. So let me switch that one out and I'll show you two more, just so you can see how this works. Because we get a lot of questions about the interference colors. Sometimes people buy the color and they see that it says, you know, interference red, but they're like, I don't see the red. So here is interference violet and interference red. And I'll just put these out by themselves. There's the red, and this is in the heavy body format. So this will show the most brush strokes. And then there's the red. So again, doesn't look very violet, doesn't look very red. If I scrape these across and pull that out a little bit, and then I'll do the violet. And the violet's kind of the most dramatic. There's the violet and as it dries, it's going to get more evident. And you can see that red too, a little bit on the camera light there. But another way to enhance these is I can just use, they show up really well on black, but I can also use a little bit of black paint. Now the carbon black is one of our strongest blacks, so it only takes really a little drop. And I'll put a little more interference violet out. And then we'll mix these up. So just a drop in there. And you can see on that white surface, can you see that little bit of kind of that green cast to it? So sometimes they tend to, on the white surface, show their complements. So let's go ahead and mix this black in there. And that's the interference violet. And now just putting that one small drop of black in there, you can really see that violet color come alive in there by introducing that black. And again, if I apply that over the black surface, it still has that same kind of violet undertone to it. And I have some dry samples that you'll really see. Because remember that the polymers are a little milky white when wet, but as they dry, they clarify. So again, this is the interference red, and I'm going to mix in one little drop of our black. And you can see that red starting to come through now. And hopefully all your questions are being answered in the chat. If they're not, you can always give us an email, help@goldenpaints.com, and email us for your questions. But you can start to see that red coming through as well, and there's the violet. So just by introducing a little drop of black, if I lay this flat, you can kind of see how that red kind of goes green there a little bit on the white. Again, that's a tendency to kind of flip to its complement. So let's look at some dry. So here we put these out dry. So this is the interference colors, and we've labeled all of these. They're available in a few select colors, and you can see I've painted them out by themselves there. So again, not a lot of punch of color. And then we did a couple of different things. We put them on the black surface and used a palette knife here, and then we brushed them on across there with the black. So you can see just by that black surface how much they really pop on there. And then we also have a line of 3 interference colors, the CT colors, and the CT is color transfer. So that means they kind of flip. And so we have this violet green that you can see here. And then we have the green orange and the green blue. And so you can see how they flip their color a little bit as you move back and forth. So those are the CT interference colors, and that's color transfer. The next one up, we're going to take a quick look at our fluorescence. So we make a number of different fluorescents available in different consistencies. So this is our fluorescent pink in a heavy body in a jar. We also have one that glows in the dark, and that's a phosphorescent green. So we painted those out by themselves and then over black. So we'll just take a quick look at the first one. The fluorescent magenta, there's a red, an orange yellow, and this chartreuse, and then you can see them over the black. They do tend to be a little more transparent. And then here is the fluorescent pink, the fluorescent green, and this is the phosphorescent and the fluorescent blue. Now the phosphorescent, you'll have to take my word for it because we can't turn out the lights or you wouldn't see anything here. But with a black light, you get quite a bit of glow from that. Even just having this in the sun with the lights out, you'll get a glow from that. So that is the phosphorescent color, and then our fluorescent colors. We also have a few colors that we call convenience colors. And those are available as well in a variety of formats. And we have, this is light ultramarine blue and Titan Mars pale, but there are several others. And the reason that we did this is sometimes because these have such high tinting strength, it's really hard to mix them down. So we just made it a little convenient by mixing those down and having them available for you. So our convenience colors, we have a light phthalo blue, a light phthalo green, light orange, the bismuth vanadate, bismuth yellow, Titan green pale, Titan violet pale, and the Titan Mars pale. And again, we've just taken some of the work out for you and created some nice convenience colors. All right, and the next thing I just wanted to point out, we alluded to this a little bit earlier, but all of our colors can be mixed with any of our mediums or gels or pastes. These two happen to be kind of my two favorite, is our glass bead gel and our clear granular gel. but it could just as easily be our molding paste or our fiber paste or crackle paste. All of the fluids, the heavy body, the open, and the high flow can be mixed with these, as well as the so flat. Just know that depending on what you're mixing with is going to change either the consistency, the drying time, or the sheen of that paint. For example, if I mix this glass bead gel with a tube of heavy body, it's going to dry pretty quickly. If I mix it with a tube of open, remember the open takes quite some time to dry. If I mix it with the open, I'll still get the same color effect. It's just going to take a lot longer to dry. So it really depends on kind of what you're after, which one you might want to choose. For the gels and pastes in general, I find it easiest to incorporate a fluid or a high flow. They're just a little bit easier to mix in. With the high flow, remember that there is a little bit of retarder in here because you can use it for airbrush or in refillable markers. So it will also take a little bit longer to dry compared to the fluid. So that's mixing our 5 lines of paint with any of our mediums or gels. And then I thought we'd finish with why so many blacks and whites. So we have a couple of different blacks and whites. We have a bone black, a carbon black, and a Mars black. And then we have zinc white and titanium white. And again, we're talking acrylics. So if I just look, we'll start with the titanium white. If I just look at those, titanium white on the top, and then at the bottom we have our bone black, we have our carbon black, and then we have our Mars black. And earlier when I was mixing the interference colors, I was talking about how strong that carbon black can be. So if we look, again, we're just doing this by volume, so not a true grayscale. But if I look at these middle values here that we mixed up with equal portions, you can see how much darker that carbon black is. So depending on what you want to do or what you're after might decide which one of these you want. With the bone black, kind of a natural pigment, as well as the Mars and the carbon. So depending on how you mix those up, you get different values. The zinc white tends to be a little bit on, it's hard to see this with the lights, but the zinc white is a little more transparent than the titanium white. So with the titanium white, you get a much grayer value when mixing them with the same colors. So here we mixed with the bone black, the carbon, and the Mars again. But you can see how much that black really punches through with all of those because the zinc is a lot more transparent. All right, so that pretty much does it. I'll wrap up with the last of these and taking the black and whites into consideration. Here we have all of those mixed up in various grayscales. Again, we did it by volume to show you the contrast between those, but that can carry over to your colors as well. So in this case, we used fluids. Again, the fluid mixed with a titanium white versus the fluid mixed with a zinc. This is our Quin red. And then in the Pyro red, we have a glaze up here, and then with the titanium white and the zinc. So all of this can transfer from fluid to heavy body to high flow to open. So to recap real quick, I'll go over all the lines. Let me pull those out. And I have the red here, so I'll switch those out for the red ones instead. So we have our so flat, have our fluid, our high flow, and our heavy body, and then our open. Perfect. So the heavy body, first paint we came out with shows the greatest amount of brush stroke. Let me try and tidy this up a little bit for you so you can see this clearly. So heavy body, first paint that we came out with, goes on thick and creamy, retains a lot of that brush stroke. If I hold that up to the side, you can see all the brush stroke in there. You can see the marks from the bristles of the brush. So that is our heavy body in the traditional white tube, but also available in jars. And then we talked about the open. The open is a lot like heavy body, but a little bit softer in consistency and a much longer drying time. On average, you could say maybe to 7 to 10 times longer, but that's dependent on the environment you're in, what you're painting on, and how thick your application is. So if you're painting on a wood panel, that's going to dry at a different rate than if you're painting on canvas. So the open stays wet for quite a while. Versatile for printmaking and silk screening if you wanted. The next one up is the fluid. The misconception here is that somehow we take a lot of water and mix it with our heavy body. That's simply not the case. The fluid is determined by the type of polymer that we're using, and so it just has a better flow than it does with the heavy body. The compromise there, or not really a compromise, is if you like something really smooth and flat, then the fluid might be the way to go versus the heavy body, which is really going to show a lot of texture. Then kind of the flattest of them all in terms of consistency might be the high flow. So it'd be really hard to build up texture with the high flow, unless you're mixing it with a medium, a gel or paste or something. With the high flow, remember this one is also very versatile, can be used for airbrush, refillable markers, pens, dip pens as well. And then the last one is our So Flat, and this is our newest one. This one, compared to Sheen, you can see this is the flattest one and also quite leveling. Doesn't retain that brush stroke. Even if you try and build up the surface a little bit, it does tend to flatten out. The last thing to keep in mind is all of these can be mixed with each other. There's nothing that prevents you from doing that. Just remember that they're going to change the drying time. So if I mix a heavy body with a open, it's going to affect the drying time. The same if I mix fluid with my open or even the high flow. These two are the slowest drying. The So Flat, the idea here is that you want it flat without brush stroke, but for some reason, if you wanted to mix it with an open, you can do that. It's just going to change that sheen and the consistency. So I think that brings us just about to the end. Thank you for joining us. I know that was a lot of information, 5 lines of paint, plus the specialty paints. If you have questions, do feel free to email us at help@goldenpaints. And thanks for watching.